Hello my friends, welcome to the channel. We finally have the complete numbers for electric vehicle sales in 2025, and they tell an incredible story, one that contradicts much of what you've been hearing from legacy automakers and mainstream media. Global electric car sales climbed by 21% to reach 20.7 million units. Let me put that into perspective. Approximately 25% of all cars sold worldwide in 2025 were electric. 1 in 4. I genuinely want to help people transition away from internal combustion vehicles. When I talk to young people, I tell them, go tell your parents that their next car needs to be an EV because they're simply better vehicles. A lot of people just don't know. On. Now, let's break down what happened, region by region, because the story is far more nuanced and interesting than any headline can capture. According to research from Benchmark Mineral Intelligence, 2.1 million electric cars were sold globally in December alone, bringing the total annual sales to 20.7 million. Charles Leister, Benchmark's data manager, noted that the global market proved more resilient than expected. And honestly, that's an understatement. This time last year, few analysts could have predicted the dramatic shifts we've witnessed. The EV landscape today is virtually unrecognizable compared to where we started. Growth of 1/5 compared to the previous year demonstrates remarkable market resilience despite constant headwinds. China remains by far the largest EV market in the world, with 12.9 million vehicles sold in 2025, representing growth of 17% year over year. Now, here's an important distinction many reports miss. When we separate pure battery electric vehicles from plug-in hybrids, the picture becomes even more interesting. Pure EV sales were actually up 26%, while plug-in hybrid sales increased by only 6%. This matters, us. BYD's plug-in hybrid sales have declined for 10 consecutive months compared to the previous year. 10 straight months of decline. Meanwhile, pure EV demand continues climbing at 26% growth, even as plug-in hybrids have dramatically improved their fast charging capabilities and electric ranges over the past 12 months. The market is clearly signaling its preference. However, challenges exist. Domestic price wars have significantly compressed profit margins. BYD, in particular, has faced major headwinds at home. Their domestic sales actually declined by approximately 50% in January compared to January of the previous year. Their international sales increased dramatically, which helped offset these domestic struggles, but overall, BYD sales still dropped 31% in January year over year. Looking ahead, Chinese EVs will no longer be fully exempt from purchase taxes starting in 2026. Exemptions drop to 50%, and trade and subsidies shift to a price-based structure. We're already seeing the effects. Sales of electrified vehicles declined in January of this year compared to the same period last year. Europe emerged as the fastest-growing major region in 2025, with sales rising 33% to reach 4.3 million units. Let me repeat that, 33% growth. Don't listen to European automakers claiming demand for EVs isn't there. The numbers tell a completely different story. Benchmark describes Europe as the dark horse that has overtaken China as the fastest growing major market. This growth occurred despite, or perhaps because of, manufacturers preparing for 2025 emissions, targets that were initially set to return in force. Even though the EU eased those targets in May, shifting compliance to an average across 2025 to 2027, many manufacturers had already committed to boosting EV volumes. And remember, this growth happened despite the fact that Europe has imposed tariffs averaging approximately 35% on Chinese EVs when you combine individual tariffs with the 10% import duty. Imagine how many affordable electric cars Europeans would have access to without these barriers. Germany, up 48%. This is the largest single car market in Europe, and it's now bringing back subsidies, approximately 5 billion euros targeted at affordable EVs. This will drive significant additional sales. The BMW iX3 and Mercedes' new electric GLC have both reportedly sold out due to overwhelming demand. Manufacturers are considering new production lines to meet that demand. Does that sound like demand isn't there to you? United Kingdom, up 27%. Strong, consistent growth. France, up only 2%. Surprisingly weak compared to its neighbors. 2026. Outlook. Benchmark Mineral Intelligence predicts European EV sales will grow 14% in 2026 as emissions compliance requirements remain in place and subsidies increasingly target low and middle income households. Personally, I think that estimate is conservative. I expect growth closer to 25 to 35%, particularly with Germany's new subsidy program taking effect. North America was the only major region to contract, with sales falling 4% to 1.8 million units. It will surprise no one that this year has been tumultuous for the region. Following the inauguration, many campaign promises regarding EV buying incentives were delivered upon, rolling back support for electric vehicle adoption. There's also been a push to domesticate manufacturing, which, if applied broadly, inevitably increases costs and reduces efficiency. The impact has been significant. General Motors canceled contracts with EV battery suppliers. Ford did the same. For the first time in 7 years in the United States, major automakers are retreating from their electrification commitments. Benchmark predicts the U.S. market will shrink by nearly 1/3 in 2026. I believe that's overly pessimistic. I expect perhaps a 10% decline, but even that would be disastrous for American competitiveness. Consider what this means. Instead of investing in EV development and trying to catch up to China, or at least maintaining some semblance of technological competitiveness, the United States is simply going backward. The gap between affordable car technology in China versus America will widen further. Canada recorded a devastating 41% decline in EV sales after subsidies were removed early in the year. Additionally, Canada effectively shut itself off from Chinese-made EVs. The result, a staggering drop in adoption. Meanwhile, Mexico, which remained open to Chinese EVs, saw sales increase by 29%. The contrast couldn't be clearer. Here's where things get really interesting. If you exclude North America, Europe, and China, electric car sales grew by 48% to reach 1.7 million units. 48%. This is the segment of the world that skeptics constantly claim will never electrify. How can people in Africa afford EVs? How can they charge them? What about the Middle East? What about India? The grid can't support it. That's largely nonsense. We have the data to prove it. Regional highlights. Nepal. EV sales have reached over 65% of all vehicles sold. Some recent data suggests 70%. Nepal, not Norway. Nepal, South Korea. Electric car sales increased by 50%. A dramatic contrast to its neighbor, Japan. EV sales increased by only 6%, despite, or because of, Toyota's aggressive lobbying against electrification. EV penetration remains at just 3%. Japan is falling behind. South and Central America. Electric car sales increased by 49%. These regions will electrify at a much faster pace than the United States. Mark my words, Americans will eventually visit South America and marvel at the silent, advanced streets filled with electric vehicles. Winners and losers. Winners. South Korea, 50% growth. Nepal, 65 to 70% market penetration. Germany, 48% growth. Europe overall, 33% growth. Rest of world, 48% growth. South and Central America, 49% growth. United Kingdom, 27% growth. China, 26% pure EV growth from an already massive base. Arguably more impressive than Germany's percentage gains Mexico, 29% growth. Norway, approximately 98.5% EV market share. Continuing to set the global example, California, strong numbers despite national headwinds. Losers, Canada, down 41%, a staggering, disappointing decline. United States, down 4%, with potentially worse ahead. Japan, only 6% growth with 3% market penetration, embarrassingly backward for a developed nation. France, only 2% growth, surprisingly weak. The data tells a clear story that contradicts the narratives pushed by certain legacy automakers, fossil fuel interests, and skeptical media outlets. Global EV adoption is accelerating. The market is proving resilient. Countries that embrace electrification through smart policies, openness to competition, and consumer incentives are seeing explosive growth. Countries that resist, protect legacy industries, or remove incentives are falling behind. The transition is happening. The only question is which nations will lead it and which will be left catching up. I hope this breakdown provided useful information, statistics you can share to debunk the false beliefs that remain stubbornly prevalent, many of them propagated by marketing dollars from companies that profit from the status quo. Thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts in the comments.